So we are a very intimate, small number of people. That doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with the quality of this webinar. And as we know from previous experiences, the webinars will be looked at a lot after they have been recorded. So we really don't care how many people are here. All we want to do is to share some of the experiences we have. And tonight, we have the pleasure of having Jacqueline Hollows among us. Jacqueline has been working in the prisons in England for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, I think it is, and has done some remarkable research and documentations on the work that she has been doing. I've had the pleasure of being able to attend one of Jacqueline's courses here at the end of January at Mind Spa, which she held together with her colleague Paul Luck, and it was a fantastic experience. Not only from the content of the seminar, but also being together with a group of people working within the prison environment, and they all emanated mental health, which is rather unusual. And if we compare that to the present situation in the Danish prisons, it is quite extraordinary, because at Danish prisons at the moment are very, very filled up with employees that are frustrated, they're stressed, they have extended sick leaves. So it's an environment which is really needs to be connected with the three principles. And I'm happy to be able to say here tonight that we just I've been working with Jacqueline on this, and we've just succeeded in getting into contact with the criminal reward system here, and have been setting up a meeting in the end of March that hopefully will lead to an extended cooperation to facilitate change within the prison environment in Denmark. So from that point of view, I am so pleased that you are here. It was wonderful to meet you in England, and I really, really, really look forward to cooperating with you within with the project that we hopefully will get in the air. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Shall I speak? Or is Harry going to speak?
Yeah, Harry.
Yeah, let me say a few words, then Jacqueline will. Yeah, I just want to put some historical perspective into what Jacqueline is doing. In the old days, which is not as well documented and so on, but when the psychologists came into the three principles tune, just to give you a little historical perspective of George, and there was another psychologist called Dr. Roger Mills, and Dr. Roger Mills worked in the communities, in Modelo, and in what we call the poor projects. And there wasn't a lot of money in these projects, but there was the impact of huge change. These were ghettos and prisons and different things that were not of the rich category. And Roger was was the first psychologist, and George was more or less the second. And the two of them had two different directions. And George's direction was with the status quo type of people, and who usually had some money. And he developed a psychology of mind, which then evolved into the three principles. And Roger worked in community work, and he created a bigger impact in terms of the results, because he was working with people who were very, very, very dealing with a tremendous amount of hardship in their life and poor. And it was very interesting as the evolution of the three principles evolved that that part of the movement sort of got left behind a bit. And then what we see now is another movement on another level. And Jacqueline is one of the key proponents of that. I also work a lot with the poor and underprivileged. It's my favorite crowd. It's just the way I am. And it gives me great pleasure to see that all of a sudden these other areas are being developed. Now, Jacqueline's kind of interesting because she also has kind of a keen business sense. So she came from, I think you came from business environment. And so she has an eye for how to make projects happen, like I do, I guess. And within that, she's made a contribution to the three principles in an areas that are impacting the social fiber of our society. And these are the people who Sid was very, very passionate about. He was not about, it must only be for a certain echelon of people. He was very much excited about the homeless, about the people in ghettos, the people in prisons, and so on. And so those types of projects, you know, although Roger is dead now, passed on, he would be so thrilled, Jacqueline, to see the work you're doing. I mean it. He would be, because that was where his heart and his major contribution was. And Sid, even though he's passed on, I can tell you right now, he would feel extremely well, not only with the fact that you've penetrated a very needed area in Europe and so on, that you've done it so professionally. And the last thing I want to add is, when you visited George, George is obviously an incredible contribution to the three principles, but one of his greatest assets is George is a very good judge of horse flesh. Do you know what I mean by that, Toon? What that means is he can pick people to work with him that are real jewels, really have a lot to offer. He can see which ones are coming from deep inside. They may not have all the credentials or whatever, but they have it. And within that, he picked people like Keith Blevins, Dr. Keith Blevins, Dickens, and other people. So he pulled those people under his umbrella. And Jacqueline is the same way. She seems to be a very good judge of horse flesh. She picks people who really have a lot to offer and really make her look good, you know. And one of them I'm going to mention is Liz Porter, who I was so impressed with. She doesn't have the credentials or the image, but wow, she's got the energy of it. And Jacqueline Hollows was able to see that. And so she's a very good judge of horse flesh. And so she surrounds herself with good horses and then smiles and does what she does the best. So with that very long, as usual, introduction, Jacqueline, you go wherever you and certainly Christian want you to go. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you both. I just need to say it's Liz Newton, who you're talking about.
Yeah, mixed up.
Yeah, no worries. But you know, she's going to get a compliment. She might as well have her name out there. I'm really happy to be in this Zoom room with you guys, especially since Christian came over just recently, and we had some really good times together and good laughs, and we got to know each other a bit more, didn't we? So it's a real pleasure. So Do you want me to talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I got into it, or
Yes,
what would
please.
you? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So as Harry alluded to, my background is not mental health at all or addictions. I was in business. I'm a trained project manager. I was head of an operations team, and all my qualifications are in computer science. So that was the direction of my world. And I was fortunate enough to be made redundant and have a number of life-changing events that happened all at the same time. My father passed away. I was made redundant. The housing market crashed. I lost all my money. Everything happened all at once, and caused me to look at my life and look at where I was going with life. And the simple insight that I had at the time, even though I never knew it was an insight, was that I didn't really like my life. I didn't really like what I was doing or where I was going. I liked the salary and I liked the status, and that was about it. And once they'd gone, then I didn't have to do it anymore. So I actually felt really fortunate that I could be free to just start again. And part of that journey of starting again was to look at becoming a life coach. I didn't even know what a life coach was before that. And that's how I came across the 3 principles. And I have to say this because I know that people resonate with this sometimes. I hated the 3 principles when I heard about them. I thought they were a cult. I thought everybody was mad. That was, they were all blissed out, and I was like, "What's wrong with these people?" And I just thought you can keep that basically. But I must have heard something, because the journey of devastation that was happening in my world was still happening. And yet I was navigating it in a much more peaceful way. I've always been optimistic, but I wasn't experiencing so many highs and then so many crashes. I was experiencing much more of a let's just get things done then, and sorting things out and doing the next thing and doing the next thing. And along the journey, I met someone with a lifelong habit of addictions, and he was 3 years in recovery, and he'd been a heroin addict. He'd been in and out of prison and all sorts of things, and we became friends. And he needed a volunteer trustee on his company, his social enterprise that he'd set up. So I became that volunteer trustee. And I just helped him with his business and with, his college work. He was doing a degree, and I just sort of, I guess Harry might say, I was in service, and that's it really. And I met other people through him, because he used to do home detoxes, and all of these other people had horrendous lives. They had such trauma, and many of them had become addicts and alcoholics, and I just thought they were amazing. I was just blown away by their amazingness. And what I noticed was that they didn't think that. So I was with all these people, and I'd see how creative they were, for instance, or how some certain skills could be used in a certain area. And it looked to me that they wore this cloak of I'm an addict, and that I'm in recovery, but I'm still an addict. And I was frustrated by that cloak, because I thought underneath that cloak, there are these amazing people. And what happened was, I'll give you a shortened version of all of this, but what happened was I started to see what people have been talking about, the 3 principles. I started to see it within them. I saw that their held beliefs, which were thought, were creating their own reality, for instance. And that was true to them in the moment of that creation, but it wasn't true in another moment, because they would have some other different experience. I saw that wherever they were in their state of mind or their consciousness, they were responding to life from that place. And I saw that they were amazing, and I felt deeply connected to them. So even though I did Michael Neal Super Coach, and I'm grateful that I did do that, actually it was the addicts and the alcoholics that taught me about the 3 principles. And most impactfully, because when I saw that they were okay, I realized that I was okay. And that brought a whole new level of understanding to me. So I just carried on volunteering and working with them, and having, at the time it was casual conversations about how life works this way and not the way we think it works, or we've been told it works. And I never got into any arguments about AA or the 12 steps or anything like that, just because I saw that it for me, in my opinion, quite a closed community, and had quite, sort of strongly held beliefs about how things worked. So I didn't have to do any of that. I just left them with it. And I had an insight one day that was very powerful for me, and I'm still following, which was that I realized I loved these people. I fell in love with them, and I wanted to do anything I could to work with them. And I didn't know how to do that, or what I needed to do that, or what it meant, or how I would earn money, or anything. I didn't know anything. I just knew this is what I want to do, and I've never experienced that before. So I followed that day, and now 4 years later, I've got a social enterprise, I've got a business, I get contracts and things. But at that moment, I didn't know any of that. And all I knew, I didn't even know, I didn't know in my head. I just felt it and did whatever I could to follow that feeling. And whatever I could looked like carrying on working with people, obviously. So I said, send anyone to me. I'll do one-to-one sessions with them. Most of the people that I worked with didn't have any money. Prior to that, I have to say, I was attempting to be an executive coach, and charge people lots of money for making their dreams come true, I think I used to say, or something. And the problem was that I didn't believe myself. So I'd be sitting with people and talking about their dreams coming true, and thinking, this sounds like a load of, exclamation marks. And yet I would sit with somebody who'd had, terrible trauma in their lives, and was shaking, was 5 years sober, but yet was still shaking and crying and clearly living in a fearful prison in his own mind. and I would just feel immense compassion and caring and love for that person, and just have this conversation. And I didn't, as I like to say, I didn't even know what I was talking about. I just said what I knew and how I saw things at the time. And I followed those breadcrumbs. I worked with people, whoever came. I had all these rules at first about I'll only work with people who have been 5 years in recovery, and this, that and the other. And it was all rubbish. It was all made up. People would come to me and they were still in active addiction. People would come to me and they were like on the first day of their detox. So I realised, like, actually it's everyone. And for a few years, I didn't want to work with professionals. I only wanted to work with people who were really disadvantaged and who were really suffering. That's the only place at the time that I could get the feeling. That's changed now, and I do adore them the most, but I love everyone now, so I can work with anyone, which is very fortunate. So for a little while, then I just worked with people, and then eventually, and I've heard others talk about this. I've heard Elsie talk about how she used to write letters and so on. And I did that. I went to visit addiction services. I tried to get into 12-step meetings. I wrote to people. I turned up at meetings. I turned up at networking. I did whatever I knew to do and just kept doing those things. And I don't think any of it's wasted. For anybody out there who's thinking, how do I start? What do I do? Just do what you know. Just try the next thing. None of it's wasted. 2 years can go by and somebody you met once at a thing that you went to can get in touch with you and say, oh, I've been seeing you around and I have this question, or they can get in touch with you about another thing. So none of it's ever wasted. It's all part of the journey and the learning. Eventually that led me to having a meeting with someone in the prison, and he had read a book by Richard Carlson. And so when I started talking about Sid Banks, he said, I think Sid Banks took his ideas from Richard Carlson. I was like, I think you might find it's the other way around. But anyway, again, it's another long story, but he eventually invited me to do a small project with them, a pilot project with them, which turned into a 12-month pilot project, and we're still there 3 years later. So we started delivering workshops in prison to the guys, and we also work with the support staff, and now we work with the officers, as Christian saw. And I'll fast forward to yesterday, because yesterday was incredibly impactful for me. We started, the NHS, who are our sort of healthcare system, have to take care of the people who smoke, and the prison is becoming a non-smoking prison on the 15th of April. And they have no psychosocial care, so they invited us to put together a program to take care of cravings. And they whittled down on the money, of course. So we came up between us with a program, and the peer mentors, because I teach guys now to become practitioners while they're still in prison. So I run a peer mentor program, which eventually becomes a practitioner program. And the current peer mentors that I'm working with, do you know what a peer mentor is? So a peer mentor is a person who has probably the lived experience. So that would be, say, a prisoner who maybe has addictions or mental health issues, who has done a program, doesn't have to be our program, could be any program, and then they want to work with other people. So a little bit like the fellowship, like the 12 steps. So somebody who can help another person on their journey because they've been through a similar journey. So we work with the peer mentors that have been on the Free Principles program that we run. And we said we're going to put together a new program called Beyond Cravings, and they got all enthusiastic and they created a program and a logo and everything, and we put all this forward. Well, after it was accepted, the men got all upset and annoyed and they didn't want to do it anymore. And they said, well, we just want to sit in the feeling, and we just want you to play Sid, and we don't want to have to get involved in content and form. But I haven't been around for a couple of weeks, so they were telling my colleague Liz about this, and they got all angsty. And then my facilitators got all angsty, saying, well, we don't work to a syllabus. We just go and we sit in the feeling and we do this thing, and how are we going to work to this syllabus? So everybody was getting itchy and scratchy and so on. But, you know, I'd sort of got them together enough to say, let's do it. And Liz had gone in and saw the guys, the peers, to try and sort of bring them together a bit. And yesterday was the first session of the 6-week program to teach a group of men how to support people who are giving up smoking. And I only sat in for half an hour. I opened the group, and then I let them all get on with it. And then I sat in for half an hour at the end. And we're talking about 13 prisoners, and 4 facilitators happen to be in the room. And so these are people who have experienced multiple traumas, many mental health issues, personality disorders, addictions, repeat offending behaviour, you know, you name it, that it was in that room. And in that half an hour, it's the highest conversation I've ever heard in any group of people. That absolutely, it was at one point so high, it felt like the room was a spaceship. And that we were just floating somewhere in the universe. Like, it was ridiculous. And that was down to these men who have been so deeply impacted and found their true selves and are living from there. So, for instance, one of the facilitators said, could one of the peer mentors describe 3 principles, because the new people keep hearing these words and they don't know what they are. And I do my best to paraphrase, but the guy said, so thought is what happens when you see something or you hear something or your inner experience and you have a thought, and it creates a reality because you experience that thought in that very moment. And your consciousness explains that to you. Your consciousness is what delivers this experience to you. And depending on how aware you are of the greater mind behind all of that, depends on the type of experience that you'll have, whether it's closed down or broadened out. And that thought, it just becomes personal in your own mind, but it's delivered through a greater universal mind that we all have access to. And I watched one of these Zoom rooms earlier, and I heard someone say, "Isn't it hard to explain the principles?" I thought about this guy who just so beautifully explained the principles in such a way that absolutely everybody in the room understood it. And that it's not that they understood it, but we were all touching that place where he was coming from. And so we heard it. And then one of the other guys explained it in another different way, in a much more sort of whole way and rounded way. And every single man in that room could point to the place and touch the place within them that is us. And what a privilege to sit there and experience that. People, some of the men say to me sometimes, because they love their moms, they say, you know, my mom says that you will have many blessings, and I think I'm already having them. I'm already having my blessings right now. So that's why I smile a lot. Do you want to ask any questions, or?
You know, it's one of the things when you were talking, you brought up something that I've seen, in the sense that when something looks rough or sort of looks like it's falling apart, and I experience, in my case, I'm just thinking of a little bit of fear. Those are the situations that actually are announcing to you that's where you should go. And if you go into that without any thought, it explodes into this amazingly beautiful feeling. And I could feel that you didn't judge that situation, you just let that situation work its way out. And as it worked its way out, the emanation of it was this, well, perhaps the most powerful feeling you've been able to be a part of. And I've seen that same thing in what I'm doing, is this, I don't want to go, is the moment when I should go the most type of thing. And then when you're describing that feeling, how can you not feel passionate about what you're doing when really they're teaching you about the three principles, or love and understanding, or truth, or whatever we want to call it?
Yeah, that's true, Harry. And that's a little bit like, I've realized, because somebody said to me yesterday, the thing is that you have an edge, and so that's why you can do what you do. And I've been reflecting on that, and I think everyone has an edge, and you've just pointed to the edge. That's where the edge is, isn't it? Is that everyone has that, but sometimes people stop at the edge, and I'll go over the edge, and you'll go over the edge, and that's where the magic happens. So part of our work is that from the early days, bless him, Dr. Jack Pranksky said, make it a research project. You know, he encouraged me at the beginning when I told him that we'd won a year's contract with the prison, and he said, make it a research project. Well, you know, I've done research. I've got a master's degree. I was like, yeah, that's cool. I can do that. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and it's been a labour of love, and it's had its ups and downs, and it's been, you know, times when I've just thought, why am I doing this? In fact, Mara Gleason said, that's why none of us have done it, you know, because it's hard, and everyone that wants to work with me wants to do the facilitating. They don't want to do the research part, but bless them, they all did. Now the thing is that by doing that, we've evidenced what we're doing, and we've evidenced it with gusto. You know, we've got a control group. We've carried on evidence in it, so that I'm here in this room talking to you, because you know, that's what's brought people in a lot of the times. But we submitted. Well, I submitted my paper to an international conference, and it's the 8th International Conference for Addictive Disorders and Alcoholism. And I saw that you could submit your paper. So I submitted my paper and they accepted me, which I didn't think that would happen. But I just thought, oh, you know, it's worth doing it. I didn't do it for a long time. I put it off and I thought, don't be silly, you know, who are you to do that, and all of those things. But eventually I just wrote the abstract and I submitted the paper and they accepted me. And I'm now going to Singapore to present at the 8th International Conference on Addictive Disorders and Alcoholism. And I've looked down the list of other academics and people presenting, and every single, even the most contemporary program or idea is based on the fact that addiction and alcoholism is a disease when it isn't. So they're all based on this incorrect assumption. And I'm the only one that's going to be saying that's not true, and I can prove it. That scares the living daylights out of me. I feel intimidated. I feel, excuse me a minute. Who's there? Can you let the cat out?
See, this is very professional. One.
I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't think you could hear me then. Can you cut that bit out? She keeps me meowing. Yes, so I feel intimidated. I feel scared. I feel excited. I feel I'm right at my edge on that. I'm right at my edge, but I know it's got to be done. I've got to go there. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to come next from that? I have no idea, but I know I have to do it. And that sometimes those things have to be done, right? And you have to break through those barriers. And I don't feel I will see the benefit of the work that I'm doing in my lifetime over and above the amazing benefit I've already described. I don't see that is possible. It doesn't seem possible to me. But it doesn't matter, because it will eventually have a tipping point, and it will eventually be in every prison and in every school and in every place. And we've got to just do what we can do now to forward it as much as we can in our own individual ways. And that isn't always going and speaking at conferences in Singapore. Sometimes that's just being kind to your pets, cooking loving meals for your family, being present with the barista. Sometimes it's just about living life in the moment and enjoying that moment. And if that moment happens to be submit a paper to somewhere, or go work in a homeless shelter, or start a business, then you follow that. But it's the same. It's all the same.
I thought that the work you have been doing with documentations of things, we'll just wait till the cat is out.
It's quite impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quite incredible. Is the cat out?
Cat's out. Cat out? So sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. Now, what I wanted to say is, I think it's a stroke of genius that Jack Pransky told you to get documentations of the work you're doing, because that, to my way of thinking, is really the same thing that Sid Banks saw when he said, well, if I'm going to have this brought out into the world, being a welder, I have got to get in touch with some of the professional fields within the mental health system. And he got in touch with the professional psychologist, etc., etc., etc. And I can tell you this, I would never had entered into the criminal reward system and got an accept for a meeting if it wasn't because of your papers. Because I would have been standing with another theory, with another thing as a supplement or to what is already there, and people wouldn't have had the time. But due to the fact that you made that paper available, the reaction of this lady that is really constructing the educational system for the employees in the criminal reward system was, this is new. This is she could see there's something that she hadn't seen before, and she could see that it was backed by some serious research and some serious documentation. So I'm pretty damn sure that you will be doing very, very well in Singapore, because the work you have been doing really deserves that. And I really think that we can see, if we look within the present prison system in Denmark, it is really frustration on all levels. It's frustration on those employed, and it's frustration on the inmates, and it's really frustration everywhere, simply because they really have come to that edge. They don't know where to turn to now. And I think what you have created is really the flashlight that is necessary, and the documentation of it that is necessary to convince the skeptics that this might be a solution to what we're looking for at the present moment. So I am so happy that you did that work, because it is going to open doors not only in Denmark but everywhere else in the world, I'm sure.
Thank you. That's brilliant, and I would like to say that I'm so happy to hear that, because it's easy to get lost in the idea of what we should do and documentation and research and everything else. But my reason for doing it initially was as a service. I came from a place of service. So when Jack mentioned it to me, I did it as a service to the Three Principles community. I never had any idea it would have any, bearing on my own life. I just wanted to go in and work with the guys. That's all I wanted to do. But I'm fortunate enough that I have, some business background and some academic background that I sort of got on with it and did it. But I did it as a service, and so it's thrilling to me now to know that it has that impact in that way, and of course it's ended up serving me too. But I wanted to bring it back to is that it seems to me that whenever you come from service, only good can come from that. It doesn't seem that anything else but good can come from that for everybody, for yourself, for the people you're working with, for the ripple effect, the amount of families that get in touch with me and partners and that I hear so much about the ripple effect of what one man has done and how that's impacted their lives. And that all comes just from a desire to help and to do whatever I can do in the moment with one person. So it's so important to bring it back to it's just one person. That lady that was sat in front of you is just one person. And then that goes on, doesn't it? Because people get overwhelmed by what can they do and they don't know how to do things. But we all know how to do what we need to do right now.
Yeah. But you see, I think that one of the things that discourages people is that one of the defense systems of the established community, also within psychology, is their cry of war is evidence, 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 evidence. And in Denmark, we've been working within the addiction field for 12 to 14 years, and what is demanded from the present setup is evidence based on 25 years. Now, if that is what you want to have, evidence based on the 25-year practice, then everything is going to stand still until this period of time has really run out. So it's part of the Danish or the part of the defense system of the already established to cry evidence every time something new comes up, and you overcome that obstacle simply by doing your paper, and that is going to be to do a world of difference within this field, because you overcame one of the major obstacles and one of the major defense systems in the present system.
And one of the things that I've noticed, Jacqueline, is the three principles is something new. And everybody is aware, as Christians kind of documented, that it's not working. And they are actually deep in their heart looking for something new. But it has to be presented in a professional manner, or in a manner that they can accept. But it's a very beautiful feeling. There is only one perfect product out there, and that's truth. And as expressed, in our case, via the three principles, but it's just truth. And this fact, if you can realize it, whoever's listening to this, that this is not only what we have experienced in our own life, but we also know the world is desperately looking for new, fresh, alive piece of wisdom to whatever is bothering them and what they're doing. And they're passionate about their world. And one of the things, when I heard you talking about Singapore, is it is great to have documentation and have a language. Like if you go to the bank, you can't just be an airy-fairy person. You have to speak the language of the bank, or they're not going to give you the loan. But they'll still only give you the loan if you have a beautiful feeling about what you're talking about. and this beautiful feeling that you'll take from Singapore is the thing that will attract people, but you have learned how to express it in a way that they can accept. And that becomes the learning on what we call it, the complementary formless and form connection. If we, as you documented, Christian, if we don't have the form together, the formless is not felt. And if we only have the form without the feeling behind it, it again is worthless. But when we bring the two together, we find a collective consciousness is not only experienced within ourselves, but in your case, Jacqueline, you've really learned how to ripple. The ripple effect has been magnificent, because you have personified what so many have not been able to accomplish with truth. And that was, how can I, in a most loving way, be in a state of service to humanity? And in a very practical way, you brought all your skill sets together to do that. And of course, we can all see that you're the perfect person for what this particular aspect of it is. And I have one more question. You have done research. This is kind of interesting. Is that accessible to myself, or is it only like some of that research that you've done? Can people access that?
Yeah, so I didn't do it on my own. So Professor Tom Kelly, Jack Pranksky, Eric Lambert and Dennis Savard, we've all written this paper together. So I just want to make sure that's mentioned. And we at Beyond Recovery have created a plain English summary of the academic paper, because that is a little bit difficult to read, and everybody can have access to that. It's on our website, but I can email it to you. I think our new website's not live yet. Have you got it?
I've got it.
Yes. Okay. So can you share that? And then
sure.
That has a link to the paper on Sage, which is a downloadable paper. I think you have to pay for it, but then the authors get credit if you download it from Sage. But we've done the English summary, which is enough. It has the evidence in it. But I want to make sure that authors get their right credit as well. You know, I'm just the face of it.
We'll send it out, Christian, to all our members, just as a privilege.
Christian, in that copy that you've got, Tom Kelly's name is incorrectly spelled. It should be an Kelley.
Okay. Yeah, got that.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Jacqueline, you've it seems to me that you're gathering momentum, rather, the difference between how you're talking last year and how you're talking this year. Last year you were kind of doing neat projects, but they were trying to penetrate. But it feels like this year you have stepped into the bubble of being part of the status quo services out there that is still unique and special because the product is so special.
I don't think that's true. I think that we still have a lot of challenges about stepping into there, but my vision is clearer. So I have a lot more clarity and confidence about what I'm doing and about the whole vision. So although the establishment is still presenting challenges, I don't feel concerned by those challenges.
Beautiful. What a beautiful feeling. Talk about growth. Fantastic.
Jacqueline, are you going to bring your experiences from work with addiction out of the prison settlements into the world, or are you going to concentrate it on the prison?
Right now, I'm going to concentrate on the prisons, just because. Well, we have a number of things. So there's plenty of prisons still to work in. So. So there's 120 prisons in the UK alone, and we're sort of pitching ourselves as the expert in Europe. So there's lots of prisons, and but a part of that is going to be that we're creating an academy for when the men get out, so that we can carry on with their practitioner training, and they will be the ones that scale the organisation, because they would be the ones that go and set up community projects and homeless projects and youth projects and so on, and we will encourage that. So we'll be setting up a sort of entrepreneurship type academy for those guys and giving them practical help, as well as having them stay in the conversation, as we say. And then the other aspect of that is that I've always spoken at conferences and so on, even though, by the way, I absolutely feared public speaking before I started doing this work. So it's like that didn't come easy. That was another edge. But I feel that the speaking out and being the face of the product is helps to overcome the sort of outside stigma and difficulties that people have. So we look towards creating collaborations so that men can get work and women can get work and have good networks when they get out of prison. And then the other element is that we work with people who want to get into this area or want to work in social, established social projects. And we have work experience schemes, so that will grow. So we will work indirect, well, it isn't even indirectly, but we bring that work that we do in the prison to the larger community by getting people to come and do work experience with us. And then they tend to, everybody who's worked with me tends to go off and create amazing projects of their own, because they get to see firsthand how it works, really, when they see these men flourish and blossom. You can't stay in your own reality after that. So the hands-on experience, I think, is so valuable. So we have that as a project now, and then we're also developing a project for corporates, which is where some of the facilitators like working with businesses. So they'll go and work with a business, maybe the CEO, and then they will get the CEO to sponsor either a man's journey or a prison program. So we'll get their corporate social responsibility tapping in there. So that's the plan anyway for world domination. So watch out. But there's so many ways that we can make this work, and we obviously will continue to apply for grants and do the groundwork and create relationships within the Her Majesty's Prison Service. But we know that there are many ways of skinning the cat.
Yeah. Okay.
It's exactly when Dr. Roger Mills went into Modelo, which actually released Jack Pransky's career when he wrote about that. He did exactly what you're doing. He was the only one who had the vision of how to not just help individuals, but to have that ripple effect, not only in the community, but with the police, with the educators, with the service providers. And as he branched out, these especially 5 Modelo women became powerhouses in the movement, and they started to go out and share with other communities and so on. And you even though you have your unique flavor to it, you sound very similar to Dr. Roger Mills in your philosophy and approach, and in your ability to manifest it. And one of the things I want to emphasize to our audience, she's just following a spiritual feeling. She's not actually directing how this thing is going to go. It's not a thing in her mind that she sees, I'll do this is my business plan. She's following her passion and the spirit is taking her in the direction. So in answer to your question, Christian, she actually doesn't know where she's going to be next year, but right now, she's just allowing herself to let her mind explore this playground, which she has natural vision and talents in, and the spirit is giving her a kiss. Go, Jacqueline, you're doing beautiful work. We like what you're doing. You're sharing your heart and your passions, and people I love this word. Thomas used this word the other day too, this ripple effect. And I think it's actually describes perfectly what's happened in the 3 principles. There's been a ripple effect, and it's warm, balming, healing, and challenging.
Harry, you have brought something new into this webinar. You're starting doing some very awkward sounds with your mouth. Was it kissing sounds I heard?
Yes, it was.
Well, okay. So everybody, do you think that this is a great note to say that this has been a wonderful evening? And I would love to say this, if I may, in order to finish this off. I think this is the first time that our guest speaker has really entered the fundamentals of how to bring the principle out in the world. And I think that what you have been sharing about going out and following feeling and doing services, etc., has been very, very inspiring. And I would like to recommend this to the Danish VP community as a basic instruction in how to get your butt in gear and come out and talk about the principle, because I think that's what this has been a great deal about. And I thought you formulated that beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
and Harry, you're absolutely right. 100% follow Pina. I really like the fact that the spirit kisses me, so that's great.
Yeah, that's nice. Anybody else have some questions, etc., before we close down? Thomas? Oh,
Nice to see you, Thomas.
okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Harry. And particularly Jacqueline. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Wonderful, Jacqueline. Wonderful. Beautiful. Very, very beautiful.